We had huge news yesterday, which is that Joe Biden will get an opportunity to select the first of we don't know how many Supreme Court justices during his presidency. We learned yesterday that if Democrats don't screw it up, and unfortunately, I already will have an example for you today of a Democrat who seems to not understand the risks here and that this could end up getting screwed up. 83-year-old Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer plans to retire. And as a result, Joe Biden will get to replace a liberal justice with a liberal justice. And that is an important factor here in that this will not change the balance of the court, but it will ensure that Breyer's seat will stay with the left, the liberals, whatever term you want to apply, for some period of time that will be dependent on the age of the person selected to replace Breyer. So NBC News reporting Justice Stephen Breyer to retire from the court, paving the way for a Biden appointment. The liberal justice's decision to step down after more than 27 years on the court allows Biden to appoint a successor who could serve for decades. Biden and Breyer are scheduled to appear together at the White House today as the Supreme Court will announce his retirement. That may have happened by the time you listen to today's show. Breyer is one of the three remaining liberal justices. His decision to retire after more than 27 years on the court allows Biden to appoint a successor who could serve for decades in the short term, maintaining the current 6-3 split between conservative and liberal justices. This is a really important aspect of this, which we're going to talk about. We're replacing a liberal with a liberal. It doesn't shift the court. Trump's big thing was putting in Amy Coney Barrett to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, replacing a liberal with a pretty serious conservative. Now, Joe Biden previously said he would appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court, who would be the first black woman ever on the Supreme Court. It does appear as though that is still the plan. There has been a short list of potential nominees released, and one of the primary names that really, I mean, listen, we don't yet know, but the person being mentioned as the front runner is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was appointed last year to the U.S. Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. And so you can take a look at that short list that is out there. But D.C. Circuit Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson at the top of the list. California Supreme Court Justice Leandra Kruger is believed to be on the list. South Carolina U.S. District Court Judge Michelle Childs on the list, and others. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki yesterday asked about Joe Biden's commitment to putting a black woman on the court, and she had the following to say.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Two subjects. So let's say hypothetically, a Supreme Court justice was to retire and announce it on his or her own terms. Does President Biden plan to honor his pledge to nominate a black woman to the court?
Well, I've commented on this previously. The president has stated and reiterated his commitment to nominating a black woman to the Supreme Court, and certainly stands by that. For today, again, I'm just not going to be able to say anything about any specifics until, of course, Justice Breyer makes any announcement, should he decide to make an announcement.
Okay, so immediately there is argument, disagreement, controversy over this. There are some on the right who are saying this is racism. This is racism. You are preemptively saying, I will not consider white people for the position. Therefore, it's racist to say we're going to appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court. Now, I think that's a terribly bad faith argument. And I must give the following reminder, if not disclaimer, to the people who may not be familiar with my view on identity politics. I am not an identity politics fan. I am against the use of identity as a cudgel or to silence or to elevate when it comes to the world. And that being said, I recognize that one's identity can be an interesting and relevant factor in the exploration of topics of all sorts, economic, social, cultural, whatever the case may be. And so for me, these ideas of I will nominate a black woman, they're not super interesting to me. I don't like Biden more because he says, I will put a black woman on the court. But I'm now not so deluded as to think that this would be the same as saying, I will only put a white person on the court. We have a history in the United States where we had a Supreme Court for the longest period made up exclusively of white men, and a history of enslaving black people in the United States. So while I am not an identity politics guy, I recognize that it would be a relevant milestone for the country to say, hey, we've had for hundreds of years, we've had all these different types of people in the country, and yet we've never had a black woman on the court. Now, I also would say this is not only restricted to black women. What about Native Americans? What about Asians? The point here is we can simultaneously be against the toxic, destructive, counterproductive identity politics that I've been criticizing on the program for a very long time and recognize that, wait a second, we've never had a black woman on the court. Oh, it would be a relevant milestone to have one. Of course, starting from the baseline that there are countless black women who would be qualified to be on the court. That's another aspect to this that the right is being very bad faith about, which is saying, when you say I'm going to put a black woman on the court, that's a category which I'm going to seek to fill. You are no longer putting qualified people there. You are choosing identity over qualifications. Now, if there were no qualified black women in the country, that might be an argument to be made. But of course, there are countless qualified black women to be on the court. And so the idea that we are sacrificing qualifications for identity, it also is not the case. So I hope that it's coming through that we can be reasonable about this without falling into these very bad faith arguments that the right is seeking to make. I think the bigger concern is if and how Republicans are going to come up with a way to block this, right? I mean, I don't know, guys. We're only 9 months from a midterm. Maybe it's too soon to be confirmed. Shouldn't the people have a say? Or maybe Omicron or cancel culture? There must be some reason if Breyer announces the retirement today, when the retirement is announced on a Thursday during winter in the Northern Hemisphere, Marjorie Taylor Greene gets to pick instead of Biden. I'm obviously kidding, but they may try to figure some way to try to block this. Now, one other aspect of this is that on the identity piece, other presidents have done the same thing. Just to be thorough on that, remember when Donald Trump said this and none of the Republicans went crazy?
I will be putting forth a nominee next week. It will be a woman.
Wow. And the crowd cheered for that. It was okay when Trump said it's going to be a woman. Or remember this? This was Ronald Reagan. This is Tom Brokaw. Who remembers this one?
Ronald Reagan today promised to appoint a woman to the Supreme Court if he's elected president.
Whoa, isn't that identity politics? They're total hypocrites. They didn't care when Trump did it. Okay, fine. We know that. Next thing, I can imagine in all seriousness not wanting a seat at the current Supreme Court table. Let me explain what I mean. We have a hyper-partisan court right now. We have a court that at 6-3 is making rulings obviously based on partisan politics and not simple, sober interpretations of the law. The court is a 6-3 majority right now for the conservatives, and it will remain a 6-3 majority once Breyer is replaced with whoever Joe Biden nominates. I'm not sure I would even want to be part of a court where my opinion would almost literally never matter. If you had a 5-4 conservative court with Justice Roberts, who has sided with liberals in the past, it leaves the possibility that when you put in a black woman to be part of some votes that will have an impact and make a difference. There is no chance of that for as long as this is a 6-3 court. Now, I'm not literally saying whoever is nominated should turn it down, but I could understand why a nominee might think, it might be better for my legacy not to be nominated right now. Just a thought that I'm having. And of course, if the person is young enough, they could be appointed, they could be confirmed now in this kind of futile 6-3 situation, and down the line, circumstances change and they end up being part of some impactful decisions. Last thing, Republicans are also now pulling this. Is Joe Biden going to get rid of the problematic Kamala Harris by putting her on the court? Here's Peter Alexander asking about that.
Chair Ginsburg, none of that you can share?
I'm not going to detail internal planning from here, no.
Okay, then let me ask you a couple other questions. Is there any scenario in which the president would select his Vice President Kamala Harris for the Supreme Court?
Again, I'm not going to speak to any considerations, preparations, lists, and as we've stated earlier, and you heard the president say, there's a long history of Supreme Court justices determining when they may retire.
And then because Jen Psaki didn't rule it out, then Peter Doocy followed up about the same thing, and then it becomes a story that it's like a runaway train.
Talked about is in an initial package.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. When you were asked about the vice president possibly being selected as a Supreme Court nominee, you said you're not going to speak to any considerations. Does that mean she is being considered?
Again, Peter, I'm not going to speak to the reports of a Supreme Court justice retirement that hasn't been announced.
And then Fox News was talking about this, and it took on a life of its own. Absolute last thing on this. Democrats might still screw it up. And there is a tweet that exemplifies this from Jennifer Haberkorn, quoting Senator Dianne Feinstein. Apparently, Senator Dianne Feinstein doesn't see a rush to confirm a Breyer replacement, saying, with 6 months until Justice Breyer departs the court, the Senate Judiciary Committee will have ample time to hold hearings on President Biden's nominee. I really hope that they don't take all of that time, because that's exactly how you get into a situation that allows Republicans to say, now it's rushed. Now it's right before an election. We can't do this. Don't do it, Democrats. Please don't screw it up. All right. Last week, I interviewed Vincent Racaniello, virologist from Columbia University. And he said it does make some sense that countries are starting to roll back COVID guidelines and restrictions. When you look at the UK, when you look at Israel, when you look at other countries, it makes some sense because as this Omicron wave goes down, it does seem like Omicron is significantly less deadly. Doesn't mean everybody has only a cold, but there are some reports that say the Omicron death rate is 0.2%. That would put it at basically flu, which is 0.15%. Vaccines widely available, very good at preventing serious illness and death. Omicron tailored vaccine coming in a few months. If not after this wave, then when is sort of the question that is increasingly being asked. Of course, bearing in mind some people are going to need to be careful for a long time because of specific health situations. Denmark is now going back to normal. Denmark will end most COVID restrictions and, quote, welcome the life we knew before. Denmark Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen announced yesterday that Denmark will throw out most COVID pandemic restrictions that it placed, including masks. Restrictions currently in place are for the public to wear masks on public transit, in restaurants, shops, healthcare facilities, and retirement homes. However, following the February 1 change of restrictions, which is Tuesday, masks will only be required in hospitals, healthcare facilities, and elderly homes. We say goodbye to the restrictions and welcome the life we knew before, Frederiksen said. As of February 1st, Denmark will be open. According to Health Minister Magnus Heunicke, Denmark's recent cases of COVID were more than 46,000 daily on average. However, only 40 people are in hospital intensive care units. We continue with a strong epidemic surveillance. Then we can react quickly if necessary. Despite lift of restrictions, Frederiksen warned there could be a rise in infections, which may lead to a fourth vaccination shot being necessary, which other countries have found doesn't actually make sense. So there are certainly controversies here, but this is a question many countries are going to be faced with. I don't pretend to know the answer. One aspect of this that many doctors are pointing to is, if not after this wave, then when? Because if this wave moves us to the endemic phase where it takes on more of a flu-like seasonal trajectory with a lower death rate, this secondary Omicron variant that now is being looked at, which may be even more contagious, but even milder, although we don't yet know for sure, would push us even closer to flu/cold. What do you wait for is the question. And it's not for me about, are we now at no risk? It's what milestone would we be waiting for if indeed that's the trajectory. So I'm not pretending to know what needs to happen, but I am asking, what would be the milestones, if not in another 6 weeks, as the cases continue to decline rapidly, if they do? In many states, Massachusetts, for example, cases are already down more than 50% and declining very rapidly. Nationally, they're declining a little less quickly. Globally, they're basically flat right now. Globally, we're now at the peak rather than beyond it. So more and more countries going in this direction. Doesn't seem the U.S. is close to it. I think masks on planes and public transit will be around for a while, but there may be changes coming. I'm curious to hear from you what direction you think it needs to go. You can find me on Twitter at @dpacman, and we'll be back right after this short break. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpacman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpacman.com. Hey, so we're an independent media show. We're not part of some big conglomerate. We, every piece of equipment, every healthcare dollar that goes towards paying employee health insurance, all these things, they really come from you. We're primarily funded by the audience, and I would love it if you grabbed a membership at joinpacman.com to support the work that we do. And we want to do more. This weekend, for example, we're going to have multiple correspondents at the Trump rally talking to Trumpists, helping us to understand what's going on. We can only afford to do those things and more things, going to debates and different things as we get into the midterms. We can only do it with your support. So please sign up at joinpacman.com. We've got a bunch of great member benefits, including an extra show that we do every day for our members. And you can use the coupon code WOW22 to discount the membership to an even more shockingly affordable rate at joinpacman.com. All right. I did not plan to talk more about Sarah Palin. I know many of you were hoping David never mentioned Sarah Palin again. Couple months ago, 1 month ago, I guess, 6 weeks ago, Sarah Palin said she would only get vaccinated over her dead body. She now has COVID, and Sarah Palin's defamation suit against the New York Times was scheduled to start this week, and it's been delayed because she has COVID. We learned that she has COVID sometime after Saturday. Saturday, she was out at a restaurant in Manhattan. We then learned she has COVID, and yesterday she was out again. Sarah Palin is out at restaurants with COVID, and there's a bunch of different elements to this. Freedom News reports that Sarah Palin is seen dining at a Manhattan restaurant while waiting for her trial to resume. This was published last night. She was seen dining and speaking with patrons at Elio's Italian restaurant in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, following her positive COVID test just 2 days prior. She is seen with her group seated in the outdoor area. She's just going out to eat, I guess, with COVID. Let's take a look at a little bit of this, and I'll describe what's going on in a moment.
They got to be super careful about it because they spend all that money.
So if you're only listening today and not watching, she's in one of these kind of like indoor-outdoor or outdoor-indoor things. She's walking around. She's, knocking on the outdoor-indoor kind of tent type thing that is going on there. And she has COVID. So there's a couple of different interesting things here. One is there are vaccine requirements in Manhattan for going to restaurants indoors. And from what we know on Saturday, she was indoors. So the first question is is she lying about being unvaccinated? She's actually unvaccinated. She's actually vaccinated, claiming she's unvaccinated, but showed her vaccine thing. Or did this restaurant not actually check it, meaning they're violating the rules in New York? We don't really know. The second part, though, and the bigger part is we're talking about Saturday to Wednesday, right? So she was out to eat Saturday. She tested positive, presumably Sunday or later. She hasn't isolated for the required 5 days. She instead went out to dinner. And this is completely irresponsible in every way. There's no math that says this makes sense. She was out Saturday, so presumably she wasn't positive then. We learned she was positive Sunday. So that gets us Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You're talking about 72 hours later, and she's already back out at a restaurant. So this, we knew that we've known for a long time she's a disgusting person. We've known for a long time that she's probably a liar, and whether she's lying about the vaccination or not, we don't know. But she's told all sorts of other lies in the past. But she's just out with COVID in New York City and awaiting her defamation trial. Now, one other thing I do want to mention, and this is just this doesn't have anything to do with Sarah Palin. I genuinely don't know at this point. You know, it's like it's outdoor, indoor. They've placed an indoor thing outdoors. It's all enclosed in plastic with heat, and I guess it's like slightly open. I really don't care. Like, I go to this stuff as well, but to some degree, I find it funny when it's like we've basically taken indoor dining and put it outdoors. Sometimes there's it's completely enclosed. I just don't know. You know, I don't know what the risk level is and how it varies in these different things. I'm not doing actual indoor dining right now, as I've said many times. But sometimes I look at the outdoor ones and I'm like, I'm basically indoors. I'm outside of the restaurant, but I'm clearly indoors in some kind of enclosed thing. Who knows? Who knows? But that's what's going on. Sarah Palin out with COVID, out on the town. We have very bad news for Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. We have now heard that Matt Gaetz was told, Matt, you had sex with a minor. She's under 18. The broader context here is this investigation that's now been going on we've known about it for about 10 months into Republican Trumpian Congressman Matt Gaetz, who is being investigated for a whole bunch of different things, including possibly having sex with a minor. Sometimes we call that statutory rape. Sex trafficking of a minor across state lines. Potentially paying people for sex. There's all these different things. He's denied everything and has lawyered up with some of the best sex crimes defense attorneys. And one of the questions has been, is he sort of like a bystander here and he wasn't ever even really told, hey, some of the stuff you're doing might not be okay? There is an incredible blockbuster piece of information now. As the Daily Beast is reporting, witness can confirm Matt Gaetz was told he had sex with a minor. One of the key interactions Joel Greenberg, this is like his wingman, claims to have had with Matt Gaetz is a phone call informing Gaetz they'd been sleeping with a minor. Someone witnessed the call, meaning it is not only Greenberg that says this call took place, there's a witness that now corroborates it. Here's the detail. On September 4, 2017, according to his confession letter, Joel Greenberg called his friend Matt Gaetz with some bad news. The teenager both men paid to have sex with was underage, Greenberg claimed. Now, two sources tell the Daily Beast a cooperating witness can confirm details of that call for one damning reason. He was in Greenberg's office when the call took place. The witness, Big Joe Ellicott, Greenberg's longtime best friend and an employee at the Seminole County Tax Office, recently pleaded guilty to fraud and drug charges as part of a cooperation agreement. Although Ellicott has so far avoided charges regarding sex trafficking of a minor, which Greenberg pleaded guilty to last May, he was present for the call that Greenberg made to Gaetz on September 4th, according to two people. The call, they said, was short, and Gaetz was the one who ended it. This is, and here is the specifics. Immediately, I called the congressman and warned him to stay clear of this person and informed him she was underage. Gaetz was equally shocked and disturbed. There was no further contact with this individual until after her 18th birthday. This is just absolutely incredible. Now, of course, investigators aren't stupid. They are going to look at phone records, and I'm sure already have, to see if there is such a call that took place between Greenberg and Gaetz on September 4th of 2017. But we now have a witness to the call. Greenberg and the witness both are saying this call took place. And this is looking worse and worse for Matt Gaetz. Now, do we know if charges will be brought? No, we don't know that. A lot of this comes to what can you prove? Do we know whether there were other such instances where Gaetz was repeatedly told about the underage reality of this woman? We just don't have all of the information. But what do we know? We are 10 months in and the investigation hasn't ended. Gaetz's wingman is cooperating and has pleaded guilty. There is a cooperation agreement for another individual associated with the entire thing. And there are now specific assertions being made that it wasn't just that it just so happened that this is what took place with Gaetz. Gaetz was told that this is what took place. So if I had to guess, this isn't going away anytime soon. And specifically, if and when, what particular charges will be brought against Gaetz, we just don't know. We'll have a link to this article and more information on our Instagram, which you can find at David Pakman Show. You can also follow me on Instagram at david.pakman. If you value what we do at the David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and t-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. It's great to welcome to the program today Brian Karem, who's an award-winning journalist and author of the new book, Free the Press, The Death of American Journalism and How to Revive It. Great having you on, Brian. I appreciate it.
Thanks, David. Pleasure being here.
So, okay, I mean, when did the death of American journalism start? Was there a particular period where we can start to see this demise?
Sure. I blame Richard Nixon and Roger Ailes, both imps of the devil, who one came into office and, committed as many crimes as he could, and the other attached to him and eventually spawned Mitch McConnell and Fox News. So those two together began our journey, and then it was Ronald Reagan who actually planted the first seeds of destruction. And every president in the last 40 years has had their hand in doing it, some more than others, some less.
And when we say the death of journalism, I mean, in a literal sense, we have media outlets, we have people called reporters and all of these things. So like, what are you talking about? What is it that has degenerated?
Well, the term, for one, to be a reporter, you have to at least have at least one copy editor. Otherwise, you're just some idiot spouting your opinion, and it's okay. I'm all fond of, opinions, but to be a journalist, you have to vet facts. And the process of how we do that is broken down over the years. How we do it, the institution has fallen apart. Look, there's vast media. The biggest problem, the underlying largest problem in the United States with journalism is a lack of community journalism. There are vast informational deserts, news deserts in this country, thousands of communities where there is no local news. And until we fix that problem, we can't fix the bigger problem. The smaller problem has to be fixed with investing in community newspapers, giving tax breaks to small business owners. What's wrong with a $100 rebate on your taxes if you can prove you subscribe to a newspaper or a radio station or something? That's where you start, because and look, governments over the last 40 years, state, local, and federal, have gotten rid of public notice ads. And those are probably one of the key things that you need to build newspapers. In fact, those public notice ads provide transparency on government. Everybody can pick it up and go, oh, look, here's an estate sale. The city council's meeting Friday. And salesmen would use those, and lawyers would use them to find clients and to find people to relate with in the community. And all of that help build our communities. At the national level, we divide our communities by going, right or left. But at the local level, everybody wants a paved street. Everybody wants the water to work, the lights to work, the schools to work, hospitals, police, all of those things that we have hey, why is that stoplight not working? We can show up at a city council meeting and find out. But all of those things have kind of broken down over the years because of a lack of local and community newspapers. And until we fix that, and by the way, that's where most national stories start, is with community journalism. They start there. And until we invest in community journalism, we're not going to solve our problems.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many different areas that are factors here, and I'll just name some of them. And then maybe you could tell us whether these are things that could be solved individually or whether they're really all part of the same thing. So you've got, okay, on the one hand, you've got the internet, which has created essentially this model where at very little cost, you can essentially rewrite and do reporting by phone rather than doing real investigative journalism. That has put pressure on newspapers and other media outlets to say, well, let's divest from the expensive investigative journalists and instead do this thing. So that's one thing. Let me mention a couple others.
All right. Well, let me address them one by one.
Okay.
So I don't forget it. In that regard, the internet is a great thing. What newspapers and television and radio and traditional media did wrong was to get tied into the perpetual news cycle. So instead, we can vet facts, and people scream to the left and to the right that we're biased, conservatively, or we're biased liberals. No, we're biased towards money.
Right.
Because constriction of the business, we go where the money is.
Yes.
So you end up with news that you want rather than news that you need. And that's the danger of it. That was a management problem. And that's because we have fewer experienced people in this business anymore who can fend off the need to go first. Oh, they're showing up live. We have to do it. Take a look at the Steele dossier, for example. All right. The Steele dossier came out and the very first report said, not vetted. This is not vetted information. And yet everyone ran with it as if it were.
Right.
That's the problem. So the internet isn't a problem. It's a solution with the right people behind it.
No, without a doubt. So that's one piece, the technological factors that have changed things. Second, we look at some other countries. There's a fee everybody pays towards public broadcasting, for example. You talk about what about $100 tax credit if you subscribe to this or that. We also then have the entire debate around, hey, you get a basic cable package and some number of bucks is going to Fox News or whatever, even if you don't want it to. And so people are paying often for so-called news that they don't even actually want. So there's that structural issue that needs to be looked at as well, it seems to me.
Well, the problem there is you need to reinstitute the fairness doctrine so that what has happened in a recent press conference, President Biden referred to it as informational alleys, that we go into alleys where we hear what we want to hear and not what we need to hear. And I call it in the book informational silos. We're all kind of siloed into our own existence and we never hear what anybody else is saying.
Sure.
Well, the fairness doctrine helped increase public news. It helped spawn the news industry. And so when you reinstitute a fairness doctrine, so you have to at least listen to the other side on matters of import, then perhaps you can break down some of those informational silos.
From what I've read, though, the fairness doctrine as it previously existed would essentially have no teeth in an age where so much is. I mean, you need something different. You need something different because of the internet, right?
Well, and that's one of the things I say in the book is that you need to have a blue ribbon commission to look at it. You need to institute the fairness doctrine, but you need people in this industry and lawmakers to assess how we can do it, so that it makes a difference. The real problem, the fairness doctrine never really had teeth. I mean, never did. No one was ever lost a license because they didn't adhere to the fairness doctrine. It's just that it kind of gave us all a guardrail that we could all aim for. And so public service programming, public affairs programming, news, all was spawned by that. It started in 1949 under the Truman administration, and people said, yeah, okay, they said, we're going to sell you the airwaves, but for 1 hour a day or whatever, you've got to do public news. And so that was kind of without any, real consequence to it. People fell in line. You need that today. You need at least the guardrail and then discuss how you can make the guardrail solid. But Yeah, it doesn't. It won't work. You can't just go, all right, reinstate the fairness doctrine as it existed. That won't work. But you need some form of fairness doctrine to make sure that it does work.
What about the sociocultural shift that has taken place in terms of attitudes towards news? And this includes two pieces. One is lack of media literacy, where people can't even tell whether they're watching news or opinion. So that's one side, people not really understanding what it is that they're watching. The other side is this sort of contempt. And I'm curious to hear from you how responsible Trump was for this or others, about if it's adversarial and you don't like it, it's fake, or they're lying, or they're biased, or whatever. To what degree is that change in the attitude towards what news is a problem here?
Well, taking your last one first, Trump was a symptom, not a cause. Trump is a con man who used existing differences and division and further exploited them. As he told, I can't remember who he told, but he said, look, I tell people that you're the fake news so they don't believe you.
Right.
Well, that's old. That's really an old tactic, embodied in the statement, don't shoot the messenger. We're just giving it to you, pal. You don't like it. Too bad. Go clean it up. It's not upon us to say. Now, we've lost, I think, to your first part, what we've lost over the years is there's a lack of institutional knowledge. And because of that lack of institutional knowledge caused by the constriction in our business, and that constriction in our business was caused by the fact that when I first got in this business, there were maybe 24 companies that ran 80% of what you see, read, or hear today. There's 5 that commandeer about 90% of what you see, read, or hear.
Right.
And that's because we removed the restrictions on ownership. And so what happened was larger and larger companies began to buy each other up. And as they did, bottom line counted more. There were fewer reporters. Like if you owned a media conglomerate that used to be comprised of 4 different or 5 different or 100 different newspapers who all had reporters in Washington, D.C. for their specific newspaper, you would go, well, I can save money by just having one reporter there.
Right.
Got rid of a lot of jobs and experience. And it became more popular when I first got in this business. You had to have 3 to 5 years of experience working as a beat reporter somewhere in a small market, so you understood what it was to be a reporter.
Right.
And today they hire you straight out of school and will hire you and put you in the White House with no experience at all. And therefore, we lose our credibility because what you end up with are reporters without experience who are more, they're more susceptible to the access journalism. Oh, I won't be able to get on Air Force One. Oh, I won't be allowed into this room. Oh, I won't be able to talk to these people if I do this. So that's led to what is a disgustingly low level of real reporting in the United States. And it's only going to get worse if we don't fix it. It was in 1958 that Edward R. Murrow, appearing before the Radio Television News Directors Association, warned us that if we don't clean up our act, we are destined to fall for nothing but slogans and propaganda in the future. And by God, he nailed it.
So what's the lowest hanging fruit? Because you've got the media literacy piece, you've got the media consolidation and lack of enforcement of antitrust piece, you've got regulatory FCC, net neutrality, fairness doctrine aspect of this. There's all these different things. What's the lowest hanging fruit that would have the greatest impact most quickly?
Community newspapers. Invest in them and give tax breaks for them and encourage them. And that's where you start, because that's where you build reporters. Some of the best reporters. Look, why did Walter Cronkite have so much gravitas? In 1965, I think it was, when he went to Vietnam, and he put together a documentary, which was all fact-based, and then at the end of it, he offered an opinion. It's not unusual for reporters to offer opinions. He offered one. He said, it's obvious to this reporter that we're not going to win. We've got to negotiate our way out of it. And LBJ said, shit, I've lost middle America. I've lost, Cronkite. I'm doomed. I won't run for re-election. Why did people respect that opinion? Well, because Walter Cronkite had the gravitas to be able to say it. He had covered World War II. He was a radio beat reporter. He had experience upon experience upon experience. What anchor today on any news show has that? What newspaper writer today has the gravitas of an H.L. Mencken. We don't have that because we have lost institutional knowledge. When it costs too much to have a reporter around, they find other ways to make money. Because guess what? By the time you're in your mid-30s or 40s and you got a family, you can't exist on what they're going to pay you in this business as a reporter.
So if I understand, the community newspaper, a community media outlet piece, it's good because, number one, it creates more diversity of opinion. It's good because, number two, it trains reporters to be ready to go to the national level. Number three, it's good because financially it's dividing money up amongst more institutions. Like, there's a bunch of different ways in which that is a positive thing.
Right. I agreed. And yeah, I agree because I wrote it. But and then there are other things, like the reinstitution of the press. I think you need a national shield law to protect reporters so they don't go to jail when they have confidential sources. As a reporter who was jailed 4 times, I can tell you it's not fun. And then the most controversial thing and the thing that hurts and bites the most for businesses, using antitrust legislation to bust up the big monopolies.
Right.
But it has to be done in some respect somehow. And that's why you need a blue ribbon commission to decide how to do it. You have to have more reporters on the planet. There are twice the number of people on this planet today as on the day that I was born, and probably about half the number of reporters. That's a problem.
Right.
And it's illustrated best by a place I used to work, Laredo, Texas. When I worked there in the 1980s, there were 100,000 people. There were 3 television stations that broadcast in English, two that broadcast in Spanish. There were 2 daily newspapers in English and 2 in Spanish. There were probably 4 or 5 radio stations that broadcast news. Now that was almost 38 years ago, and 100,000 people. Today, there are 300,000 people, and there's 1 television station and 1 newspaper.
Right. Right.
That's it. There's your problem in a nutshell.
Hey, I'm going to give you 2 examples to kind of frame this next question, and you tell me what you think. Under Trump, there was this famous incident where he flipped out on CNN's Jim Acosta and then had his press credential pulled after Jim Acosta insisted on asking a question and didn't immediately turn the mic over when they tried to take it from him. Last week, Joe Biden, or maybe it was this week, who knows, referred to Fox reporter Peter Doocy as a son of a bitch, and he may have been knowingly on the mic or maybe not or whatever. What those incidents, are they equally concerning in your mind? Neither, both, one, the other? What do they mean about the relationship between federal government and the media?
First of all, Jim Acosta is a First Amendment warrior, and I love him. And secondly, there were 2 people that had their press passes pulled during the Trump administration. Jim was the first, I was the second. And I had to battle the SOB. I'll use the word son of a bitch. I had to battle Trump, that SOB, 3 times, and I beat him 3 times in court to keep my press pass.
Right.
And Jim fought him to keep his press pass. That is what concerns me. I had to stand up in a court, a federal court, with my attorney, Ted Boutros, who was also a great First Amendment warrior and represented both me and Jim.
Yep.
And it was Ted who stood up and said, the administration said they had to ban my press pass because if they didn't come down on me and people like me, that they were afraid that reporters would run through the halls mooning people. Honest to God, that was what they said. And imagine having to defend that. Taking your time out as a reporter, I had to sit in court for that. Me being called an SOB by a president, I don't care. Peter still gets it, and I know Peter, and I have nothing against any question that anyone wants to ask in that briefing room. There's no such thing as bad questions, only bad answers. God bless you for asking anything what may not be the question I'd ask. I may think, well, that's kind of shallow. But it's always the answers that are more concerning for us. There's the old story told of during Betty Ford's days when there was a group of reporters, including one fresh off the choo-choo, who saw her in a gaggle, and the young reporter said, hey, did your kids ever smoke pot? And everybody thought, well, that's the stupidest question in the world. right up until the time where Betty Ford said yes.
Right.
And then he was brilliant.
Right.
You may think a question is stupid and reflect upon it and go, well, that's a stupid question. But it's not the questions that matter, it's the answers. So I don't care if the president wants to call me a dumb SOB or anybody else an SOB. He gave him access, and Peters can still ask his questions. So there's a difference there, a big difference between having your press pass yanked, having to go to court to defend it, having a president fundamentally unknowing or uncaring of what the First Amendment means and what a press is there for, and a president who says, hey, he's a dumb SOB. I mean, I've heard presidents say that pretty much about every reporter in the White House. So they're not equal, they're not equitable, there's no way they're on the same level. And if you think differently, I invite you to sit in court with me or Jim as we have to fight to keep our damn press passes and keep doing our job.
Yeah. The exact distinction I made after it happened. The new book is Free the Press, The Death of American Journalism and How to Revive It. The book's author is Brian Karem. Brian, really appreciate your time today.
Sure, anytime.
Follow us on social media, interact with the David Pakman Show community, see exclusive content, see when we're taking calls live, and stay up to date on other big show announcements. We post daily. Find us on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, and TikTok. All right, I have a clip for you guys today that I think you're going to really enjoy. Now, I have to tell you, I have not been able to get a straight answer as to who the reporter is that asked this bizarre, cringy question yesterday of Jen Psaki during the press briefing. One person told me it was someone from Newsmax, but the person from Newsmax has denied that they were even there yesterday. So I don't know who this is, but I'm going to play for you such a cringy question. This makes Peter Doocy, who regularly asks absurd questions during the press briefings, actually seem sort of prepared. And there's a couple interesting things that go on here. We're going to hear a question read that is literally being read. You will see the reporter looking down and reading the question. And what happens sometimes is when you read or use a talking point that you don't really understand, as soon as there's any question asked about it, as soon as there's any even remote pushback about it, it becomes humiliating and embarrassing. This happened when I was in Los Angeles and was interviewed by Jesse Lee Peterson. Jesse Lee Peterson was talking to me about Obama socialism because of phones, so-called Obama phones. And then he got all confused about what even the talking point is. And when you just get a talking point you're supposed to use and you don't even really understand it, it can end up being a complete and total faceplant. And that's what happens here. Now, in this particular case, the topic is inflation and Build Back Better and whatever. If you're allergic to cringe, I would skip the next 90 seconds. Okay, let's take a look at this. And a lot of, 20% of this is Jen Psaki now having some tools for handling these types of bad faith questions. 80% of it is the reporter just not having any idea what's going on. Check it out.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question on inflation. Many people believe that government spending is a big factor in the current inflation levels.
By the way, many people believe is also good. Like that becomes a factor later as well.
Can you speak to concerns that spending plans that come out of Build Back Better aren't paid for and so could mean higher deficits and more inflation in the future?
Aren't paid for? Build Back Better is paid for. Entirely.
Okay.
So you've got to be able to say, where do you see that it's not paid for? Because the whole thing with Build Back Better was it is paid for. Now, I'll talk more about that in a moment. You could disagree with how it's paid for, or you could say, I don't believe the number, right? But you've got to be able to, because the whole thing with Build Back Better was it is paid for.
Can you speak to the concerns that are coming in that it's not actually?
Who are the concerns from, though? But who's saying it's not paid for?
Uh-oh. This pause is maybe one of the most significant pauses that I've ever seen during a press briefing. I'm even going to back it up because the pause is everything here.
No. But who's saying it's not paid for? Because there have been a range of economists saying it's entirely paid for.
Now, Jen Psaki bails her out. Jen Psaki should have allowed the silence to go on even longer, but she doesn't. She bails her out.
And that has been a priority for the president. It has also been concluded by a number of Nobel laureates and experts from a range of economic experts on the outside that it will not contribute to inflation. So those are the global experts that we would point to, but there may be others suggesting something else, but I don't know who those people are.
If those bills do pass, it will not raise taxes.
Now, see, here's the problem. This is a completely different question. No, you pay for it through taxation. That's so the reporter doesn't seem to even understand what's going on. Is it paid for versus do any taxes go up are two different questions. And it's just a mess. This person has no business being in the press briefing room.
Well, something being entirely paid for means that part of that is the highest income Americans, that companies would be asked to pay.
Paid for means there's a cost, but you raise the money to pay for it.
A little bit more. That has been part of the proposal and part of reforming the tax system to make it more fair.
So they're also not expected to contribute to future inflation then?
Like now she's just grasping at straws.
The Build Back Better bill, again, it's fully paid for. We would point to Nobel laureates and a range of global economists who have conveyed that it would not contribute to inflationary pressures. Go ahead.
I almost am like starting to feel bad because it's so wacky. You know, the question itself is just as bad as Peter Doocy's questions, but Doocy is ready with a comeback and he's ready with a slicker goalpost shift. And that's where she went wrong. The silence is just cringeworthy. And then she says, so taxes won't go up. Now, let's first talk about Build Back Better, which seems to be basically dead, although Joe Biden is going to look at whether he can do parts of it through executive orders, et cetera. There's a tax foundation general equilibrium model, which scored Build Back Better. There's a Congressional Budget Office model, which scored Build Back Better. It's very close to revenue neutral based on slightly different assumptions. Now, Build Back Better has tax increases on the rich and some other different changes to business taxes and other things, which would offset the spending. So the concept is very simple. You do $100 in spending, but you take in an extra $100. That's 100 minus 100, right? So you've got zero there. That's what paid for means in this context. There is, I have no interest in obscuring from you guys that there is disagreement as to whether things would cost exactly what is projected 10 years out and as to whether the exact amount of revenue would be raised that the Biden administration predicts. There's a real question when you're talking about spending projected out years and revenue projected out years, particularly when the revenue is not, if I recall correctly, accounting for a dynamic tax model, which says, well, okay, here's how much you would get if you change the tax and nobody changes their behavior. But typically when you change a tax, people do change their behavior. You've got to account for that. I'm more than glad to admit that to you guys, because that's the case with any bill. You could say, hey, you know what? This actually could be a little bit, this could actually raise the deficit a little bit because this thing's going to cost a little bit more and this thing is going to raise a little bit less money. That's perfectly fair. And that would be the case with any one of these bills. The problem is the reporter doesn't even know what's going on. She seems dazed. She doesn't seem to understand even the difference between paying for something and what it means to raise taxes, or what does revenue neutral mean. She just has absolutely no business being there, and Jen Psaki handling it well, but it's not a difficult one to handle because she's completely clueless. I want to just stick in one little story here about the grift train that continues to happen with the former President Donald Trump. We did 15 minutes at the top of the show about the upcoming retirement of Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. Stephen Breyer, 83 years old, is going to be retiring. And Joe Biden will get his first of we don't know how many Supreme Court picks from his presidency. And it is going to be, I'm sure, just a pretty mainline liberal who will keep the balance on the court at 6-3. And Donald Trump has immediately started scam grifting off of this. Donald Trump putting out a statement within minutes of the news breaking that Stephen Breyer will be retiring through his Save America PAC. And it reads, breaking, Supreme Court Justice Breyer announces retirement. That's true. Okay, that may be the only thing here that's true. Trump going on to say, Joe Biden will fill the vacant seat with a liberal activist. President Trump has activated an emergency 5X impact to defend his America First legacy. Now, aside from whether Biden will pick some extreme liberal, which he won't, the idea that this does anything to Trump's legacy, you're replacing a liberal with a liberal. Trump still got his 3 wacky right wingers, including one who replaced Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So the idea that this even does whatever you think about Trump's legacy, this really does nothing to change it. And then it says, please contribute any amount immediately to claim your 5X impact and to save President Trump's legacy. It doesn't actually even say who is multiplying this. So the idea here, it shows if you make a $45 contribution, another $225, 5X, another $225 will be matched. So by donating $45, your impact is $270. It's all probably a lie. I mean, it's conceivable that this one time it's not a scam, but it's probably a lie. And there's no indication here about who is matching these funds or what is going on. But immediately Trump jumping on the scam wagon. And my prediction is this Saturday, Trump's doing another rally. This one is in Conroe, Texas. We're going to have people on the ground there interviewing Trumpists. We'll try to talk to them a little bit about the Supreme Court and see what they have to say. But my guess is Trump will use this Supreme Court situation during his speech once again to try to justify the election of Trumpists in November. I mean, it'll be completely wacky. It'll make no sense. But my guess is he will try to do that. And we will wait and see. But Trump immediately jumping on the grift wagon, trying to fundraise off of the retirement of Justice Stephen Breyer. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is one of my favorite voicemail types. And it is when someone tells me I should really go to communist countries if I love them so much, ignoring the fact that I have no interest in communism or communist countries. Take a listen.
Yeah, I just heard your comments on the Trump rally.
Right.
I think you really need to try something like a special exercise, like a knee squat, reach far back as you can with both hands. Try to hold on to your ears or find your ears and hold on to them and pull your head out of your rear end.
I'm having trouble picturing this, but let's continue.
You're obviously one of those liberals that's got gay tendencies and
gay tendencies. It's like, what does that even have to do with anything? It's always anti-Semitic or homophobic at its core.
Very un-American. Go to a communist country and live there and see how you like it there.
This is so funny because, as many of you know, much of my audience hates that I'm not a communist, but I'm not a communist. I'm not interested in communist countries. Stalinist Leninism is not something I'm a fan of. Chavez Maduro, I'm not a fan. However you want to define the ideal socialist or communist country, whatever. That's not me. Find someone else. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in capitalist Northern European democracies. I'm interested, come on, guys, give me a break. But as usual, somewhere in there is some homophobia. In this case, sometimes it's anti-Semitism. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We'll talk about the Neil Young, Joe Rogan, Spotify debacle. We will talk about the heart transplant denial due to no COVID vaccine that many of you have written to me about, and much more. All of those stories on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpacman.com to get instant access.